Rainbow Road. If you've ever played Mario Kart before, you're well aware of what this track represents. It's a staple across every Mario Kart game, going back to the very beginning of the franchise. Regardless of the game, Rainbow Road has always been designed as the ultimate test of a player's skill. Tight winding turns, narrow roadways, very few barriers to save you from falling off the track, leaving very little room for error. In time trials, this track becomes even more punishing as you have to take tight lines while also executing very difficult strategies. Mario Kart World's Rainbow Road is no different in this aspect. This track is widely considered by the TT community to be one of the hardest tracks in the game to time trial. While putting this video together, I asked Logan, the current #1 player at this game, and someone who's held 28 of the 30 unique track world records, his opinion on the track. Here's what he had to say.
Dude, wait. Ooh, Rainbow Road, yeah, it's hard. It's very hard. Once you added the turn skip, yeah. I learned it kinda right when that dropped-ish. Oh no, it's hard. It's gotta be one of the hardest tracks, I would say. Like, just the sheer length and how much focus you need to conjure up. No, it's incredibly hard.
I also asked Optik, the #2 player, and she shared a very similar opinion to Logan. With all of that established, you can likely come to the conclusion that this is a very difficult track, and one that you might decide to avoid or not heavily invest time into, given how difficult it sounds, on top of it being a 4-minute time trial. I'm here to change that. Hello, my name is Arjon1277, but you could just call me Arjon. I've been time trialing this track since day 1, and have been on the worldwide top 10 since day 2. I've held the world record here multiple times across the track's history as well. I've seen everything on this track. The initial push for sub 4, the balance patch change to tricks, the founding of iconic strategies that would go on to define this track. I've seen it all. Recently, I became the second person in the world to achieve a 354, an immensely difficult milestone, with the only other person achieving this milestone being the current world record holder, Technical. I've wanted to make a guide for this track for a while now. I felt like this track desperately needed a guide that is just as ambitious as the track itself is. Not just a surface-level shortcut video, but a breakdown of every strategy available on this track and how to push yourself towards each second barrier. I'm also making this guide because I want to see more people play this track. Plenty of people don't put extensive time into this track, and/or they avoid it as long as possible. This is because of length, difficulty, or just lack of interest. I genuinely believe that with the right knowledge, this is one of the most fun tracks in the game to time trial. This video is going to be broken down by second barrier. I'm going to show you a demonstration run I've recorded for each of the following second barriers. Pre-sub 4, 359, 358, 357, 356, and finally 355. After this, I will go into detail about strategies I added into each demonstration to achieve each second barrier. These runs are designed to be feasible, not perfect, so they can reflect what you can realistically aim for. I did my best as well to account for time lost due to execution or lines across each run. Most of everything showcased in this video will be accompanied by a handcam, so you can see my inputs as well. I would have included a 354 demonstration with handcam, but unfortunately didn't get it in time for this video. I actually got very close to getting it, but unfortunately I lost the attempt at S4 NISC right at the end of the run, so instead I will show clips of strategies you'll need to include if you want to push for the elusive 354 at the end of the video. As well, this video will assume that you know what edge tricking and boosted charge jumps are, as they are common tech in this game. One last thing before we get to the video itself, I've literally never asked for this in the history of my channel, but if you enjoy the video, I would greatly appreciate it if you consider subscribing. I put a lot of effort into this video, and I hope that you find it helpful. You can skip to each section using the chapters feature here on YouTube. I hope you enjoy the video. There are a couple different combos that work on this track, but the far and away best setup to use is going to be Wiggler or Wario on the Bulldozer or Bighorn. But Bighorn is clearly superior. Bighorn gang, Bighorn gang! This setup provides the perfect amount of handling for this track whilst maximizing your ground speed. Rainbow Road is largely composed of, well, road, which Bulldozer and Bighorn excel at. Rail Racer can gain pretty significantly in the water section of S2, but it loses significantly everywhere else due to the lack of ground speed and less handling. As you can see, this run had nothing incredibly complicated in it. There's only one single edge trick in section 3, and no charge jumps. At this point in the track, I'd suggest you focus heavily on improving your lines and get used to sticking close to the edge of the track. This is a skill you'll want to build early on so that it can translate into good lines once you start to add in more complicated strats to your runs. I'm going to go into a few parts of this run that I think are important to mention when first starting out on this track. We'll start with section 1. We'll start here at the glider in section 1. At this glider, we do what is called a glider vector. Glider vectoring was initially found in Mario Kart 7, where you would glide up into the air and then back down. This allowed the player to gain tons of speed while in a glider. Mario Kart World has something very similar, although it works a bit differently. In this game, glider vectoring doesn't have to be followed up by a glide down to gain time. It heavily depends on how the glider is structured. This strat is seen on a couple other tracks, but it's primarily seen on Rainbow Road. There are 5 separate gliders on the track where glider vectoring can be done. Each one functions somewhat differently, but they all are fundamentally the same strat. This glider has many different variations of doing it. This version is going to be the easiest to do, however. At this glider, you want to glide up right after tricking off the glider panel, and keep gliding up until right before this blue fire boost kicks in. Right before it kicks in, you'll want to very briefly glide down and then stop inputting anything. There is an important detail to mention at the very end of this glider. You want to make sure to glide down towards the end of the glider so that you can land on the track a bit sooner. This is actually faster and is not very hard to execute. Overall, the glider vector itself saves around 0.2 compared to not doing it. Onto the one big strat in this run. This is going to be the path switch at the end of the section. The way it works is pretty simple, but it can be pretty intimidating initially. On the turn right before, you're going to want to take the turn as tight as you can while grabbing the coins. Shortly after grabbing the second coin, you're going to release your SMT and hold left to align yourself roughly with the boost panel across the gap. You're then going to drive towards the edge of the track and trick. You want to make sure to delay this trick as long as you can in order to make crossing the gap a little bit easier. Successfully do all of that and you have executed the S1 gap jump. That's everything I have to show here in section 1, so let's move on to section 2. Here in section 2, there isn't too much to talk about. The biggest thing is going to be the glider at the start of the section. You'll likely have noticed that I glide down for a little bit after tricking off this glider. It's actually faster to do this for as long as you can while making sure to not miss the star rings. I glide down until I'm as close to the bottom section of the first star ring as possible, and then I stop. From there, you want to minimize your inputs until you land in the water section. Any kind of big inputs in this glider can quickly result in massive time loss. Ideally, you want to do only very light taps left and right to fix your alignment in the glider. From there, you want to aim to land in the shallow portion of the water on the big water hill up ahead. Landing anywhere else in the water will result in a big time loss. From there, you'll want to stick in the shallow section of the water until right before you reach the coin ring. Ideally, you should get 2 coins at the coin ring and then land into the shallow section of the water once again. That's about everything that needs to be explained in section 2 for this run, so let's move on to section 3. Starting it off immediately here in S3, we'll be talking about the glider. When you trick off the glider panel here, make sure you glide up for a bit during this glider. For some reason, doing this gains you a little bit of time throughout the glider. It's not a lot, it's only a couple frames, but it's not a very hard time save to get. I hold a specific set of inputs throughout the glider that can gain a little bit extra time. It's not incredibly necessary when first starting out, but it's also not hard to do either. For those interested, here's an explanation on these inputs. After tricking off the glider panel, I start out holding down left to slowly inch myself to the left side of the cannon. A little bit further into the cannon, I shift to holding pure down. Then I quickly shift to holding down right for a little bit, and then finally I shift to upright. This set of inputs allows for a slightly faster navigation of the cannon that saves probably a couple frames overall. Moving on to the mushroom shortcut, you'll notice that I go for a tighter version of this shortcut. It involves getting an edge trick during the mushroom in order to extend the boost just a little bit longer on the ramp. This edge trick can be a little risky to go for when you're first learning this track, but it quickly becomes one of the easier strats to execute after some practice with it. If you don't feel comfortable going for this edge trick, you can always go around and release an MT trick off the ramp. Keep in mind, however, this does lose a small amount of time over the optimal approach. After the shortcut, as you go around the spiral, you'll want to release an SMT shortly after you grab the second coin, and aim for the edge of the track. You'll want to chain your SMT with the trick off the track to do a couple different things. First of all, doing this gets you a boosted trick into the blue fire section. This by itself gains a little bit of extra time. Second of all, this also allows you to land into the blue fire section sooner than if you had tricked off the ramp instead. This allows you to get a boost out sooner and thus save a little bit of extra time. This strategy can also be a little bit intimidating at first, as it's easy to mistime your SMT release or trick off the track too early. This can lead to a lot of attempts falling off of the track because they end up being too short of the track. But like everything else in this run, it becomes very consistent with some practice. The final thing I'll mention for S3 in this run is this SMT right here. You'll notice that I delay releasing this SMT for a bit after going around the turn. This is because it's actually faster to carry this SMT into the ramp up ahead. Doing this gives you a big boost of speed forward and allows you to save a decent amount of time over not doing it. It's not very hard to execute either, so I would definitely recommend including this in your runs. We are now on to S4, the longest section of the track. First things first, the glider into this section. You'll want to aim to glide up all the way through this glider until you see the blue fire coming out of the engine of your kart. This glider vector is very easy to execute and will be crucial for runs of this track later on. Next, you'll notice that I apply the same mechanic from the glider in S1 to this first glider here in S4. Landing sooner here saves a little bit of time over landing later. It's not anything incredibly significant, however, it's only about a frame or two. One thing I will mention is you don't want to land too soon, however. This will cause you to bounce along the ground as you land, which could cost you some time. To avoid this, I lightly tap up on the control stick right as I begin passing over the road, and then shift more up once I'm about a second past the road. Moving on to the second glider of this section, you'll want to do two glider vectors here. I do a slower variant of these glider vectors in this run, but once we reach the 357 demonstration, you'll get to see the faster variant. This variant simply involves gliding up very briefly, and then down right as your boost from the star ring runs out. You'll then glide down for a bit, then pull back up for a brief moment, then glide straight back down to the track. These glider vectors can save a decent amount of time compared to not going for them, even if you mess them up a bit. Moving on to the last couple turns, ideally you want to get 2 SMTs out on each turn. This isn't too difficult to do, but if you don't feel comfortable going for them yet, you can instead go for a UMT around each turn for a very tiny time loss for each turn. It's only about a frame or so. Lastly is the final glider. This is a simple brief glide up into a brief glide down to the finish line to finish off the run. And that caps off the pre-sub 4 demonstration. There was a lot of introductory stuff for this demonstration, but that isn't too surprising, as this is what you'll likely be doing when you first play the track. As you get better at the track, you'll start to add in additional strategies from other demonstrations further into this video. Hopefully this gives you a good starting point to work with though. Best of luck! Let's move on to the next demonstration. Welcome back! So, first thing you'll notice is that I used 2 different clips for this demonstration. That's because I tried so many different variations of a 359 demonstration, and I'm not joking, every single one came out as a high 358. I wish I was joking. I'll show them on screen, but I literally had a skill issue in the opposite direction. I had too much skill. It was really funny to me when I realized this. The run on the left is the same as the pre-sub 4 run, however, it adds in a big shortcut in S4, which we'll get to in a little bit. The run on the right adds a few edge tricks and charge jumps in S1 and S3, and the same shortcut in S4, but besides that, it remains largely the same as the pre-sub 4 run. Due to that, there won't be a whole lot new to discuss for this run. First things first is to discuss the beginning of the run on the right. You'll notice it goes for 3 edge tricks at the beginning of the run. Let's focus in on those first 2 for now. These first 2 edge tricks work very well together, as the first one can very easily lead into the second one. You want to aim for your right tires to be aligned for the part of the track I've circled up ahead. From there, you'll edge trick and immediately repress the jump button to land back into a drift and start holding full right. You'll then shift back to full left and do some left and right wiggles to not go too tight around the upcoming turn, but make sure to stick close enough to the edge to line up the second edge trick. Once you get partway around the next turn, you'll quickly release your MT, drive towards the edge of the track, and quickly edge trick again. Then you'll hop back into a drift and wiggle to get your MT out. It sounds like a lot in practice, but it's actually very simple to pull off in reality. Now, we'll address the third and final edge trick done in S1. This edge trick is both deceptively easy and deceptively hard to go for. You want to get as close to the edge of the track as you can, quickly charge the MT, and then you'll want to release the MT and edge trick right after. You might need to briefly tap left right as you edge trick, as it's very easy to go too aggressive on this edge trick and fall right off the track, or even land into a wall ride on the side of the track, which also kills the run anyways. All of these edge tricks combined save roughly a third of a second. The last thing to mention in the run on the right is that it introduces a boosted charge jump, or BCJ as I'll be referring to it for the rest of the video, into the run. To do this, you simply start a CJ during a boost like a trick or a boost panel, and then release the CJ right before the boost runs out. This carries the momentum of the boost forward and saves about 0.1. This BCJ carries partially into S2, so the time save for this BCJ is mixed between S1 and S2. Let's move on to S2. Due to how the run on the right takes S1, you'll notice that it doesn't take the same shortcut as the run on the left does in the water section, instead opting to go around. This is because if the run on the right took the shortcut, it'd actually get pace-locked by the train coins. Speaking of which, allow me to explain. If you don't want to hear an explanation of the pacelock on this track, feel free to skip to the next part of this guide. The train coins on RR are on a cycle beginning from the moment the race begins. I want to clarify, this is specific to TTs and does not apply to online or Grand Prix / versus races. The coins are on a different cycle in those modes, so this does not apply to those modes. The coin in specific that we will be talking about is the very first train coin. This coin is thrown second between the two, and fully lands on the track in its designated spot around when the timer reaches roughly 131.131. You can, however, grab this coin roughly a third of a second sooner if you swing further left to grab it. The absolute earliest you can grab this coin is around 130.850 on the timer, which is when it lands on the track for its first bounce. This means that all runs are locked into not outrunning this coin, as missing this coin delays when you can reach 20 coins, to such a degree that it causes massive time loss. You'll notice that the run on the left opts for a safer grab of the first coin at around 131.071, which is between the coin's first and second bounce. This is much more consistent of a spot to grab this coin compared to grabbing it at its first bounce location, which I've only ever achieved once. There are ways to get around this pace lock, such as going around the shortcut like the run on the right does. This does delay when you grab the coin, but also comes at a significant time loss as you now can't use your mushroom with the shortcut and instead have to save it for somewhere else that doesn't save as much time. This does come with the bonus that you can grab 2 additional coins in the water section, which means you can get to 20 coins much sooner and thus save back a large majority of the time you lost by having to go around. Ultimately, once you get fast enough, you will be forced to go around like the run on the right does, unless you want to be down a coin or 2 for an extended period of time. There are ways around this issue, but I'll save that for the end of the video. Welcome back! Now that I've explained what Pacelock is, there's one quick thing to mention. You'll notice as the run on the right exits the water, I do a small right tap. Exiting the water can be a bit random, since sometimes you'll slow down briefly as you exit and other times you won't. This right tap negates this randomness if you time it right and allows you to not slow down at all when exiting the water. That pretty much handles the explanation of S2 for this run. The rest of S2 remains entirely unchanged beyond having to deal with the Pacelock. On to S3. The only thing that changes in Section 3 compared to the pre-Sub 4 is the addition of 2 more edge tricks right at the beginning of the Blue Fire section. These 2 edge tricks can be a bit intimidating initially, especially the first one. However, if you can get the first one down, then the second one is incredibly easy to get afterwards. When aligning for the first edge trick, you want to align a bit to the left of the edge of the track, start your right drift, and quickly wiggle for a little bit. Then you'll want to tap right, release your MT, then immediately switch to holding left and trick. The biggest issue with getting this edge trick is going to be your alignment. If you don't angle yourself far enough right, or attempt to hop too far left, then you won't get this edge trick at all. If you angle too far right, you can get the edge trick and then land right into a Wallride on the side of the track and fall off. This first edge trick requires a delicate balance to ensure you align properly for it. You can also get a random fail where you get the edge trick and stay on the track, but you get like stuck in the ground or something, which delays your boost coming out and loses like 0.1. There are a lot of ways to fail this first edge trick. If you land the first edge trick successfully, then the second edge trick is incredibly easy. Just don't pay attention to my attempt at it in the demonstration. You can trick very early for this edge trick and easily get it. You can trick anywhere in this circle and easily get it without any problems. This is the only change from the pre-Sub 4 demonstration, so let's move on to S4. We're now back in S4 once more. You'll notice that both of these runs spend all of the rest of their mushrooms on this glider. Why is that? Well, for some strange reason, using a mushroom on a glider in this game is very fast, surprisingly. With the run on the left, it saves roughly 0.6 overall. This is the only spot we can really use it in the run since we'll be doing S4 NISC at the end of the section. To time it, I use the mushroom right after I hear the last note of the final lap fanfare play. The run on the right uses 2 mushrooms at this glider due to having to go around for Pacelock back in S2. If you're in this situation, you'll want to use your first mushroom right as the boost from tricking off the glider panel runs out. Then you'll wait for the first mushroom to run out, then quickly use the second mushroom. This saves an additional about 0.35 over using 1 mushroom. You'll likely have noticed that despite these runs using 2 different strats and routes, they wind up nearly tied at the beginning of S4. This showcases how little of a difference these routes make at the end of the day when you're going for 359. The run on the right obviously can maximize time save more than the run on the left can, but that becomes way more apparent the faster you go. These runs remain entirely the same as the pre-Sub 4 run up until the point that we reach S4 NISC. The variation of S4 NISC that these runs use is the charge jump, or CJ method. All demonstrations for this video will use the CJ method, however there are 2 other methods available, but only one of them is faster than this variation. I'll explain this one and then also do the slower variation. The faster one will be explained later in the video as it's significantly harder. To do the CJ method, you simply need to do your glider vectors and land onto the track and start the CJ. It takes some time to charge this CJ up, so make sure you give yourself enough room to get it ready. There are 4 banners that line both sides of the track. You'll want to release your CJ right around when you're passing by the second banner. You'll then air trick onto the side of the track, but make sure not to go too low or you'll get picked up by Lakitu. If you get on the wall before or right as you pass by the third banner, then you should have enough room to ride the wall up, trick off, and then air trick as needed towards the fourth banner. Make sure you don't go too far left too quickly after getting off the wall or you will get picked up by Lakitu. You'll aim for the fourth banner and trick off of it. As long as you touch the pole, the game will auto-trick you off of it. Once again, don't go too far left after this or you will get picked up by Lakitu. Once you land on the track, quickly hop into a drift while avoiding the fence, and then congrats! You have executed the CJ variation of S4 NISC. I'll now go ahead and explain the slightly slower variation of S4 NISC, so feel free to skip this if you aren't interested or you already know about it. This will be more applicable online than anything if I were to guess. The slower variation of S4 NISC is going to be the glider variation. This variation is about 0.15 to 0.2 slower than the CJ variation, but it is slightly easier to execute. To do it, you'll do your glider vectors, but instead of landing on the track, you're going to go off to the left of the track. You'll then glide along the side of the track until right before you reach this line in the wall right before the third banner. You're going to air trick onto the track, right up the wall, then trick off and aim for the pole. You won't have as much air for this, so you'll likely have to aim to land a bit further right, but after the pole it is exactly the same as every other variation. The last thing to mention is, due to doing this NISC, you'll only be charging a UMT around the upcoming turn rather than 2 SMTs, since there isn't enough room to get 2 SMTs out. Bar that, the run is exactly the same as the pre-sub 4. At this point, lines are still largely where time loss is going to happen over my demonstration, hence my inability to drive a 359 for a 359 demonstration. That wraps up the 359 demonstration and explanation. We'll now be moving on to the 358 demonstration. Welcome to the 358 demonstration. You'll likely have noticed that the only additions to this run are a couple edge tricks in BCJs in S3 and 4, so there won't be much to go over for this demonstration. To start, S1 remains largely unchanged from the 359 demonstration that was on the right. It goes for nearly all the same strats bar 1. The only addition to S1 in this run is an additional BCJ right here after the long turn and 3 trick ramps. S2 also remains entirely unchanged from the 359 demonstration that was on the right, so we'll be moving on to S3. S3 largely remains unchanged from the 359 demonstration that was on the right as well. The only addition to S3 is going to be 2 BCJs. The first BCJ is right by the last thwomp in the section. This BCJ actually saves quite a lot of time compared to the other BCJs on the track. This one allows you to carry a boost into the next trick ramp, which, like the ramp you carry the SMT into, allows you to carry a bunch of momentum off the ramp and saves a significant amount of time. This BCJ can be a bit difficult to time initially, due to the auditory and visual overload going on in this portion of the track. You'll need to heavily rely on muscle memory to get this BCJ correctly. After that, there is one more BCJ that happens right at the end of S3 after tricking off the final ramp. This BCJ can be deceptively hard to time as you are likely starting to get nervous or are already nervous by the time you get here. This can easily throw off your timing and cause you to miss this one on complete accident. This has happened to me and others countless times, so don't worry too much if this happens to you as well. We'll now be moving on to S4. S4, for the most part, also remains largely unchanged. The only additions to this run are 3 edge tricks. One is significantly harder than the others are, however. The first edge trick added is around the first turn. This edge trick can be very scary initially, as it looks like you'll easily fall off the track if you go for it. This edge trick is actually incredibly easy to go for in comparison to the second one. What you'll want to do is aggressively approach the edge of the track after the second boost panel. You'll then charge your MT, release it, and edge trick. You'll easily stay on the track most of the time as you're already moving to the right when you get this edge trick. The only times I've ever failed this edge trick personally was when I went too aggressive and drove off, or not going aggressive enough, and I ended up missing entirely. The next edge trick is what I personally believe is the challenging one to get. This edge trick saves more than any other edge trick on the track, saving about 0.2. The reason for this is it allows you to carry a boost all the way to the boost panel, since normally just an SMT runs out long before you reach the boost panel. It also allows you to not slow down as much when hopping into a drift on the boost panel, so it is crucial you learn this edge trick for future runs. The key to getting this edge trick is watching the edge of the track. You'll notice it curves in and then back out. I personally aim to trick right towards the end of the curve inwards. This edge trick is very easy to miss if you adjust back to the left too soon or approach too aggressively. I aim to get this edge trick at the earliest point I can for where I'm aiming, and then shift back to the left very quickly to avoid driving off the track. With a lot of practice, this edge trick has become incredibly easy for me to get, but I do still occasionally fail it from time to time. This edge trick used to be the spot that killed the large majority of my runs in S4 for a long time, so don't worry too much if you have trouble with this edge trick. The more practice you put into this edge trick, the easier it gets. This run also adds one final edge trick on the final straightaway of the section. This edge trick on the surface isn't hard to get, but it's made significantly harder by the fact you'll be very nervous approaching this edge trick. The timing for this one is very similar to the second edge trick done in this section. You'll want to aim to get the edge trick right where the track curves inwards, but right before it straightens out. I swing left as I get it to ensure I don't drive off the track right at the end of the run. That's all there is to mention for the 358 demonstration. We'll now be moving on to the 357 demonstration. Welcome to the 357 demonstration. This time, we've included more than just some edge tricks and BCJs. Though, of course, we did include more edge tricks because this track has so many of them. Here in S1, we've now included 3 more edge tricks into the run. The first couple we'll address are the 2 added around the spiral. These 2 edge tricks by far are the hardest ones to get in the section in my personal opinion. I feel it's necessary to include them now, that way you can start practicing them and get used to going for them. The key to getting these 2 edge tricks will actually have to do with how quickly you get the couple SMTs beforehand out. I'd recommend getting the 2 SMTs beforehand out as soon as you can, so that way you can have an easier time getting the double edge trick. The key is to release the SMT beforehand, early, and drift around the spiral. You may need to do some left-right wiggles to adjust yourself a bit, but right as you charge an MT, release it, and hold hard right and go immediately for the first edge trick. From there, continue holding right and aim to get the second edge trick as late as you can while still chaining the boost together, but also without hitting the fence or driving off the track. You may have to adjust your input for the second edge trick on the fly depending on your alignment for it. I end up doing a right trick or an up trick most of the time though. Like the first edge trick in the blue fire section of S3, there are a lot of ways you can fail this strat. You can end up too wide after the first edge trick, you can hit the fence, you can fall off any time during this strat. You can also miss the first edge trick or second edge trick, or even both of them. This strat initially is likely going to kill a lot of runs, but it is absolutely worth it to learn this strat as it saves a decent amount of time for a double edge trick. After this, we do a faster variation of the initial glider vector we've been doing for a while now. This variation requires you to hold down on the control stick until right before the second boost would come out. At this point, you shift straight to up on the control stick to land back onto the track. This should allow you to glide down while still getting the glider vector. If this doesn't seem to work, you can also hold down throughout the whole glider, and this should work too, as demonstrated by Optik. Lastly, we added an edge trick after the first BCJ of S1. This edge trick, in comparison, is actually pretty easy to go for by now with how many edge tricks we've had to go for. I aim to get this edge trick on the latter part of the turn to reduce my chances of falling off after I get it, but getting it earlier still works. You just risk falling off more and also need to stick tighter after the edge trick. As long as you chain your MT into this edge trick, it should come out as a small time save over getting an SMT here. On to S2. For the first time since the 359 demonstration, we'll be adding something into S2. This time, we'll be adding drifts into the water section alongside a water boost. The drifts can be a bit weird at first, but with some practice, they aren't too terrible to do. The first water drift, in my opinion, is the trickiest one to go for. You can get a lot of air after releasing the SMT and tricking off the water hill at the coin ring. From what I understand, this has to do with how long the SMT has been going for when you trick off the hill and where on the hill you trick. Ideally, you want to time your SMT release and trick off the hill to be as close together as possible and as close to the top of the hill as you can. This strat by itself saves about 0.1. If you miss the SMT, it still saves overall, but you do lose a bit to not getting that SMT. From there, you'll want to aim to land in the shallow water and delay your water trick as much as you can. This is so the trick from the hill doesn't eat up too much of the next water trick. When you do this trick, you'll want to hold down drift as you trick and start going right. Something important to mention is when you hop out of these drifts, you must hold the opposite direction of which you are drifting. You can wiggle as much as you want during the drift, but you must be holding the opposite direction when you go to hop out of the drift. So for this first drift, you're drifting right. So when you hop out of this drift, you must be holding left on the control stick. If you don't, you'll massively slow down in the water and lose a lot of time. Holding opposite of your drift direction is what makes these drifts faster, as it allows you to maintain your speed. After you hop out of this drift, landing into a left drift, and while grabbing the coins and staying tight, charge up the SMT as fast as you can. From there, release the SMT and ensure you're holding right as you do that. You'll notice that during the first drift, this demonstration got a boost in the water. This is a water boost. The key to this trick is to get as close to the off-road and the edge of the water as you can, right as you go to hop out of this drift. You'll be using your right wheels as the indicator for this strat. If you see your tires quickly change to normal and then back to water driving, and you shoot forward briefly, that's how you know you got it. You can barely nudge the off-road and not get slowed down by it, so if your kart shoots up but you don't noticeably slow down and still get what I described, then it's likely you still got the strat. Bar that, S2 remains the same as the 358 and 359 demonstrations. Let's move on to S3. S3 remains entirely unchanged from the 358 demonstration. By this point, you should be executing S3 a bit better though, so that should lead to faster times overall. On to S4. S4 as well remains largely unchanged compared to the 358 demonstration. The one big addition is going to be the faster variant of the glider vector on the second glider in the section. This glider vector can be a bit difficult to understand initially, but here's how to do it. When you trick off the glider panel, you'll want to up trick off of it, and hold down briefly. Right as the boost from the star ring runs out, you want to barely, and I mean barely, inch the control stick up. In my Handcam, it looks like I'm not even pushing the control stick up, but I am in fact nudging it up by only about an inch. You'll hold this position for just over a second, then you'll quickly tap down to pull back up briefly. Then you'll repeat the same input you just did. If you're doing the charge jump method of S4 NISC, you'll need to cut this second glider vector early in order to set yourself up for the NISC. Otherwise, you're very likely to not reach the pole in time. This glider vector saves about 0.15 to 0.2, so it's a nice time save if you can get the inputs down. From there, S4 remains entirely the same as the 358 demonstration until the final glider. On this final glider, you'll want to glide up for about a second, and then you'll be using the same vector as the second glider of the section by barely inching up on the control stick. You'll do this very briefly, and then go back to neutral and fly to the finish line. It doesn't make a big difference over the previous method, but it's something to add into runs for a small time save. If you execute all these additional strats correctly, this should net you a 357. This demonstration I did could have been a 357.2 or 357.1, but I made quite a few mistakes, including getting too much air for S4 NISC, which lost me the most of any mistake in the run. We're going to move on to the 356 demonstration now. Welcome back! We are now quickly reaching the point where S1 looks exactly like what a top level S1 looks like. The only addition to the section is going to be the beginning wall ride, so no edge tricks this time. This strat is a small time save over what we've been doing for a while now, but it's not too difficult of a strat to go for. You'll get the first edge trick as you always have, but rather than landing into a drift, you're going to aim straight for the edge of the track. I align the center of Wiggler up roughly with this line on the side of the track and drive straight off the track. From there, you're going to wall ride until roughly this star symbol on the side of the track. You're going to then left trick off the wall back onto the track. You don't want to stick on the wall longer than this, as doing so will send you into a wide landing when you get off the wall. Due to how little this strat saves, this isn't a mistake you can afford to make. Overall, I'd estimate this strat saves about 0.08 to 0.1 if done perfectly over a perfect execution of the edge trick method. Bar this, S1 remains entirely the same as the 357 demonstration. Onto S2, where I'll finally be explaining what most of you likely came to watch this guide for. It's time for S2 Gap Jump, the biggest strat find on this track. There are a lot of pieces that go into getting S2 Gap Jump to work, so I'll do my best to explain it while not making it confusing. I'll be explaining how I personally set up S2 Gap Jump, as my setup seems to be both the fastest and most consistent approach to this strat. To start, the setup begins before we even get to S2 Gap Jump. I begin by releasing the MT before the path switch early. This is to minimize how much of a boost I get from the trick at path switch. I then hold left briefly and up trick off the track as soon as I can without hitting the side of the track. This allows me to minimize the air I get from the path switch. Right as I hit the up trick, I start holding right and do a right air trick to inch myself a bit further over to the right. I land into my right drift and switch to left as needed to not go flying off the track for this next part. I get as close to the edge of the track going around the next turn as I can. As I start going around the turn, I entirely let go of A to cancel my drift, then I hold down B to slow down while I'm going around the turn. If everything beforehand was done correctly, you should still be right up against the edge of the track. Make sure you aren't too close here, as being too close for this next part can cause you to accidentally edge trick, which instantly kills the run. You're going to hold left, hop, and at almost the same time, let go of B and repress A. You'll land into a drift which you'll have to adjust on the fly based on your alignment for S2 Gap Jump. Sometimes it'll be a very short drift, and other times it'll last for a little bit longer. Either way, you're going to hop out of this drift and immediately start another drift. Doing this realigns you to the left significantly faster. If you need to slow down a little bit more here, then you can inch your thumb over to tap the B button as needed. After this, you just have to hit the Shroom button and time a trick off the track. If you go off the track roughly positioned like this, then you've done the beginning execution correctly. Make sure you use your mushroom early enough so that you can build up enough speed to cross the gap. Using it too late causes you to not build up enough speed and you just won't make it across the gap. While in the air, you're going to spam as many air tricks as you can. These air tricks will both get you aligned further left while in the air and slow you down a tiny bit to set up for the landing on the other side. I personally only do 3 air tricks, as this is more than enough for me personally to do the landing. If you need to do more or less, then do so as you need to get this strat. Right before you land, make sure to start holding down both B and A. This causes you to drastically slow down upon landing and gives you time to react to how you landed and adjust accordingly most of the time. Once you land, your goal is to get the 2 coins on the inside of the upcoming turn. If you need to brake a bit to get these coins, then do it if you need to. With practice, however, you should be aiming to reduce how much you slow down on the setup and the landing, as this is what makes the difference between an exceptional gap jump and a slow gap jump. Hopefully you could follow that explanation. If you ever need help with this strat, then hit me up in DMs on Discord. I can almost always spot what went wrong with an S2 gap jump attempt, so I'm down to help anybody who needs help with it. This is by far the hardest strategy on the track to do execution-wise. I highly recommend practicing this strategy in versus mode, as this is the best way to get this strat down. Still with me? It's a lot to take in, I know, but you've got this. This strat took me a very long time to get down, but with enough practice, even this strat can become consistent. Let's move on to S3. S3 remains largely unchanged from the 357 demonstration. The only thing to mention is I got a lucky strat around the turn here. If you approach this turn close enough to the edge going right and start to drive off the track, you can shift from holding left to right briefly and then back to left. This causes you to clip the side of the track and allows you to stay more inside the turn while still getting the SMT out. Before S3 gap was found, I was incredibly consistent at getting this strat and had actually been hitting it as early as when my PBU was a 402 back in week 1. Needless to say, this is a weird strat and kinda sketchy to go for, but if you happen to get it, then it's a small time save. On to S4. S4 remains mostly unchanged to the 357 demonstration. The only difference is you'll only be using one mushroom on the glider now instead of two, which you've been doing for a while now most likely. It'll remain this way from now on and won't be changed, so yay! On to the final demonstration. Welcome to the final demonstration of the video with Handcam. As mentioned earlier in the video, I did try for a few days to get a 354 with Handcam, but was unfortunately not able to. I'll be discussing what you'll include to get that next. Anyways, let's get down to the explanation of additions to this run. The only new addition to S1 is the edge trick done right after the 3 hills at the start of the section. This edge trick initially can be very finicky, but it's actually way easier to get than you'd think. To get this, you'll want to align a bit to the right of the edge trick as you go off the 3rd and final hill. As you trick off it, start to hold left in midair to swing towards the edge of the track. You're going to quickly trick and then shift back to going right. You can sometimes fail this trick by wall riding or even hitting the side of the track at the same time that you edge trick. With a bit of practice, this is actually not a very difficult edge trick. This is the only addition to S1 in the run, so with that, S1 now looks exactly like a top level run. On to S2. There's only one thing to go over here in S2. You'll notice we've added a double water trick before the first water hill. This saves a little bit extra time compared to what you've been doing for a while now. You want to make sure to time this properly, as mistiming it will lead to extra time loss you don't want. Here's a very easy way to time it. As long as your S1 is a 58.450 or faster, this explanation should work for the most part, though the closer your S1 is to world record, the better this works. You're simply going to time your air tricks in the glider with the beat of the music as I did in my run. On the final air trick, you're going to hold straight up on the control stick and up trick to swing down into the water. If done correctly, this will time the first water trick properly and allow the boost to come out before you trick off the hill. This will send you flying forward. An important caveat is if you get a very low 0.1 or faster S1, then this timing won't work as consistently, and you'll need to glide down ever so slightly sooner to adjust the timing. Another important caveat to mention is this makes the following SMT significantly harder to get. You'll need to wiggle a lot and likely adjust your landing in the water to be able to charge this SMT in time. It is a nice time save if you can get both this and the SMT after consistently though. Let's move on to S3, where the last big addition to the run is. The last big addition to this run is S3 Gap Jump. This strat has some elements of randomness to it, so this explanation I give won't be perfect. However, it's the most consistent setup I've personally had for this strat. Absolutely experiment with your own setups if this doesn't work well for you. After executing the second edge trick in the blue fire section, you're going to want to align yourself around this black line in the track. From there, you're going to inch yourself over to the left a bit, and as you approach this part of the wall, you're going to shift entirely left and drive straight at this spot on the wall. You're going to hop just before you reach the wall. If you do this right, you should get a phantom trick, which will allow you to go up into the air and latch onto the wall. You're going to need to react fast here, as you won't have much time to get off the wall after this. You're going to left trick off the wall and do another air trick. This is to get you aligned more to the left for the landing. Since we don't have an SMT like before, we'll need something else to get us the boost off the upcoming trick ramp. You're going to land into a right-facing drift, and you'll need to wiggle just enough to get an MT out without angling yourself too far to the right. From there, you're going to release the MT and trick off the ramp. This gets you the same boost as the SMT did. While in the air, you'll likely need to do another air trick to get yourself aligned better for the upcoming ramps in BCJ. Do all of that and you'll save at bare minimum 0.5 roughly over going around like you used to. Hey, Editor Arjon here. I've got something to mention really quick before I go into a rant about this strat in a second. If you have a hard time getting this strat the way I described, there is an alternative variation where you instead CJ onto the wall. This takes a significant time loss, but it does ensure higher consistency with S3 Gap Jump, so if you simply just want to hit this strat without the randomness, you can do this approach instead. You can still get everything afterwards with this approach, so it's a nice alternative. Anyways, back to the video. To me personally, this is the worst strat on the track, but that's because of the element of randomness to the strat. I relate it to getting zero framed in MK64 when attempting to jump off of a wall. In MK64, when attempting to jump off a wall, your cart crosses a certain amount of distance every frame, Sometimes the distance you cross in between a couple frames crosses over the point you need to be on to jump off of a wall. This makes it impossible to get, and you'll instead tumble against the wall. With our current knowledge, I can't say for certain if this is what's going on here, but it's absolutely what it feels like to me with all the attempts I've thrown at this wall. Anyways, on to S4. S4 remains entirely unchanged from the 356 demonstration, so you can continue doing this the same way as before. It's time to move on to the final second barrier. We are now on to the final second barrier that can currently be achieved on this track. As mentioned before, I did try for a few days to get a 354 demonstration with Handcam, but was ultimately unsuccessful despite many attempts to get it. I do still want to explain how to get a 354 if that's what you want to push for, however. S1 and S2 remain entirely unchanged from the 355 demonstration, as we've already included every strat available for these sections. So we're just gonna move straight on to S3. There is one single strat included into S3, and that is a BCJ right before the S3 gap jump. If you thought S3 gap jump was hard before, just wait till you add this into your run. I'd highly recommend changing your approach to the second edge trick beforehand in order to make this BCJ and the following S3 gap jump easier to do. I go a bit more aggressive on the first edge trick and then align more parallel with the track for the second edge trick, while delaying it a bit longer too. All of this allows me to barely squeeze out the BCJ in time to get onto the wall. If you have any problems with this strat, direct your issues to Optik, cause she's the one that found it. Don't actually, Optik doesn't deserve it, she's awesome. I wouldn't have gotten 354 as quickly without this strat. The only change to S4 is a faster variation of the S4 NISC. This was the faster variation I mentioned earlier on in the guide. This version is known as CJless S4 NISC, conveniently also found by Optik. This version of the NISC is much more difficult, but saves about 0.2 over the CJ variation. When doing this variation, you can actually do the second glider vector on the previous glider fully now. You can squeeze in a third vector if you do the inputs correctly as well. To get this, you're going to drive off the track nearly angled just barely to the left of the track. As you drive off, you're going to right trick and immediately right air trick onto the wall. You're going to get dangerously close to the Lakitu zone in the bottom section of the wall. If you don't get grabbed by Lakitu, you'll ride up the wall and left trick off and aim straight for the pole. You might need to do an air trick or two to ensure you get to the pole, but as long as you get to the pole, you're mostly safe. Land back on the track like before, and the rest of the run is the exact same as before from there. Adding these two additional strats in should give you just enough leeway to barely edge out a 354 with near flawless execution across the run. And with that, you'll have included every single strat into your run that the world record and myself currently do. With all of the strats on this track and how long it is, you'd likely conclude that there are still strategies that are unimplemented. You would be correct. There aren't many strategies that have been left out of runs on this track, however. The ones that are left to be introduced are some of the most cancerous strats, or they rely on getting other cancerous strats. We'll start in S1, where there are quite a few unimplemented strategies. I'll get into why these remain unimplemented by Technical and myself here shortly. Here at the beginning after the 3 hills, you can do what I've referred to as Yoshiyoshi Strats. These are a string of charge jumps and edge tricks that Yoshiyoshi found and has used before in his own runs that are currently unimplemented by Technical and myself. They save a decent bit of time, but the hardest part is going to be executing the spiral part of the strat, as it is very hard to stay tight while getting all of these edge tricks. The next unimplemented strat was rediscovered during the making of this video by Kogerain. When you enter the glider, you can glide up until just after the orange boost runs out. From there, you'll return to holding neutral, and then right after the blue fire appears, you'll glide back up until just before you land, where you'll want to briefly glide down just to ensure you don't bounce off the track in the glider. It doesn't lose any time, but it can possibly throw your alignment off after you land. This one doesn't save a ton, but it is a very easy time save to get. The next unimplemented strat is a double edge trick around the long turn after the glider. One of the two reasons we don't go for this in runs is purely because getting the first edge trick isn't too terrible, but getting the second one is incredibly hard. This double edge trick also doesn't save a lot, even if you manage to get it. I went for this during my 354 attempts if the start of my S1 was bad, but otherwise I never consistently attempted this strategy. Next is something myself and Technical have known about for a while now. The straightaway where we do the first BCJ of the section, you can actually just do an edge trick instead here. From my practice getting this for the video, it wasn't too awful surprisingly to go for. It doesn't save very much, but it would be the most worthwhile one to go for in my personal opinion. Finally, after the boost panel, after the aforementioned edge trick, you can actually double edge trick around the upcoming turn rather than just getting one trick. This was also found by Yoshiyoshi and saves about 0.07 from his estimates. It's a bit scuffed, and the only way I could get it was to get the first edge trick earlier than usual. All of these strats remain unimplemented by myself and Technical for a variety of reasons, but there is one huge reason that connects them all together. Those of you familiar with this track know exactly where I'm going with this. There are two unimplemented strats in S2, and one is the major reason all of those strats I mentioned in S1 are unimplemented. Welcome to Triple Coin. Triple Coin has been known about for a long time now. I have no clue who first discovered it, but I first heard about it from Technical after he talked about it being a thing. This strategy is the epitome of ungodly precise. There is a very, very, very tiny area where instead of grabbing 2 coins at the coin ring, you can grab 3! This is a huge strategy since you can get to 20 coins sooner in most circumstances. However, when all the other S1 strats are implemented by myself or Technical, we get easily pace-locked by the train coins, since we're both so incredibly close to the pace-lock already. The easiest way around this is getting triple coin, which is already a very high bar to set. I can say with very high confidence that I've gotten triple coin more than anyone else that's played this track. I estimate I've gotten it somewhere between 50 to 60 times. However, that's out of thousands of attempts. Only just recently while filming for this video did I manage to get triple coin twice in a row. It took over 50 successful triple coins to get it more than once consecutively. Getting triple coin would allow for the implementation of most, if not all, of the strats mentioned in S1. It'd push back the pace lock just a little bit more and allow for much faster S1s, but good luck getting triple coin more than once in a blue moon. Even the other unimplemented strategy in this section is blocked by needing to get triple coin. Needless to say, this strategy is incredibly hard even for me with how much I've gotten it. The one other unimplemented strat, as I've already mentioned, is also blocked by getting triple coin. This is Fleet Shroom. This strategy is pretty simple. The core idea is to shroom through the off-road into the coin ring and then keep going. On the surface, this strategy seems to be relatively simple, but if you remember, shrooming anywhere before the train coins in S2 means you're going to get pace locked. The only way around this is to get triple coin. This means that if you want to attempt Fleet Shroom, you have to get triple coin. This strat was estimated by Technical to save anywhere between 0.7 to 0.9 initially. However, even with triple coin, you'll be down 1 coin on the current route going into S3. This by itself doesn't lose more than about 0.08 to 0.1. However, you then have to go a bit wider at the S3 spiral, which loses a bit more time, and then you also lose 0.6 to 0.65 to the current S4 glider shroom. I'd guesstimate, as it's never been officially calculated, that this strat can save maybe 0.1 overall, but again, you have to get triple coin to even get to continue a run using it. Needless to say, but S2 is unlikely to see anything get added into runs unless a consistent setup for triple coin gets found. Well, how about S3? As of right now, there are no unimplemented strats in S3. There's been a few ideas that have been theorized, but none of them have been proven to be faster, let alone doable yet. So as of right now, S3 remains as optimized as we can currently get it. There is one single unimplemented strat in S4 currently, but this is by far the most cancerous thing this track has ever seen. This is Cloud Strat. I'm going to come out and say it right now, as I don't expect to be proven wrong on this for a while, but I don't see this strategy being included in runs for a very, very, very long time. This bullshit cooked up by Zerai, because of course the guy who found S3 Gap has to find this shit. I'ma chill out, but Zerai has just caused me a lot of pain on this track. There's a lot of moving pieces that go into this strat, and I just don't see it realistically ending up in a run for a while. I spent 2.5 hours trying to get just one successful execution of this strat, and I didn't get it once. I had one run get relatively close, but it was still a bit away from pulling it off. You have to get yourself angled far enough to the right, start a CJ, and CJ over this specific part of the fence. If you mess up any part of this, your run will instantly die right then and there. I simply don't see any route forward, bar a more consistent setup, that will see this strat ending up in runs. No, this isn't your signal to go find a more consistent setup, Zerai. No, Zerai, stop! Stop! Anyways, I'm going to move into the last couple things I want to mention about this track for this video. I'll show you a quick run of this track for the NITA category. Then after that, I'll show you some clips of feather shortcuts that can be done online for this track. I won't mention anything about the NITA Run, as everything done in it is currently explained in the run already, bar the very beginning of S3, which is self-explanatory. Enjoy! Editor Arjan coming in again. Literally right as I was finishing editing this video, Optik rediscovered a strat that was originally not thought to be faster on this track. You can actually briefly glide up in each of these star rings in the first glider in S4, and it actually saves a small bit of time. This strat is already seen on tracks like Starview Peak and Great Block Ruins, so this isn't anything that's new. Out of all of the currently unimplemented strats, this would absolutely be the best one to add into runs.
Losing a Pokemon during the grind is like, that's so fucking stupid, man. That's so dumb.
Link, no! Link, not again! Link, not again! Oh. After we revive you too!
I'm not playing without a revive rule.
Dude is cooked.
Arjan.
Huh?
How hard is it going to be to win a Black 2 Nuzlocke without my starter?
Not very hard. Well, I mean, I've also never beaten Black 2, so. But there's so many Pokemon in Black 2.
Pokemon by searching their name?
Hold on.
There's one over Spring Free.
sounds so annoying here.
Because my cousin knows, so that means my grandma knows. That
Hold on
means
a second,
my
hold on.
My aunt knows.
I've got a chance here. I got past the RNG strat.
I'll go ahead and definitely order.
That's a Shroomless BKT. Let's go.
Whoa!
You got a best known time?
That is the fastest known time anybody's ever beaten this track, Shroomless. The only thing that I'll mention is that you'll have noticed that NITA for this track is very similar to a normal run. The only thing that gets excluded is S2 gap, as there currently isn't any known consistent way to hit the strat Shroomless. Even if it were hit Shroomless, it'd be a bit difficult for it to be faster. The run I got here isn't the greatest and can definitely be pushed to a 357, but this still is a decent time for NITA. Fair warning ahead of time that I do not play online, so what I showcase here is stuff I was told about or had seen in videos of online races. There isn't much to discuss here, but I'll bring up a few strats you can use online. In S2, you can do the shortcut in the water section Shroomless via two different methods. You can use a feather and cross the gap that way, or you can CJ onto this crystal and trick off, which will send you flying into the air towards the ramp. You'll then aim to trick off this portion of the off-road, as for some reason, Nintendo made it trickable. This will allow you to speed back up after exiting the off-road. The biggest thing to mention is that you can trick off the top path here and use a feather and do S2 gap jump that way. I definitely recommend doing this from here, as you can make it from the bottom path, but you can't land as far forward, and so you get stuck going wide on the bottom path instead. Be sure not to go off the track too early or you'll get picked up by Lakitu. Next is that you can do S3 gap jump with the feather. You do have to charge a CJ in order to make this work, and it doesn't seem to save much time at all over going around. It should be a good shortcut to take, however, if there's a lot of chaos ongoing in this part of the track. Lastly, is that here in S4, if S4 NISC is blocked off in any way and you have a feather, you can take this small shortcut instead. It's definitely not as flashy, but it is an alternative option. That's really about everything I have to mention for the online portion of this video. There's not really a lot to discuss. That is everything I have to go over for this guide. I hope that this guide was helpful and allowed for some, if not all of you, to improve your times or gain enough confidence to tackle this behemoth of a track. As I said at the beginning, I truly believe that with the right knowledge, this track is one of the most fun tracks to TT in the game. I hope this guide helps to inspire the next generation of players that tackle this track. I hope to always be somebody people can come to for help with this track as well. My first and foremost goal is always to help the community as a whole improve. If this video accomplishes that, then I will consider this a huge success. I might even consider making videos like this for other tracks once I feel like I'm at a point where I can make a good guide for them. Before I wrap up here, I want to thank a few people. I firstly want to thank King Green for helping with making many of the comparisons seen in S3 and S4 in this video. He's awesome, and I wouldn't have finished the comparisons as soon as I had he not been there to help. Next, I want to thank Optik, who provided a few of the clips you saw in this video. Apologies if they were a bit grainy. Next is Aquare, who provided some of the background music for this video. They're a pianist and performed this track's OST over on his channel. Go check him out if that sounds interesting. I also want to thank each and every one of you who watched parts of or even all of this guide. I truly hope that this guide has helped you all in some way, shape, or form. Lastly, I want to thank Technical, who was a huge part of what caused me to push my time down as much as I have since this game came out. If there's anything that I missed, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. My name is Arjan, and I'll see you all next time.